Princess Catherine has broken down in tears, and the reason is heartbreaking. Just days ago, after hours of waiting, doctors finally told her the truth about Prince Louis. And it wasn't just a health scare. It was something far deeper, something silently growing for months. What Louis had been carrying, alone and in fear, has shaken the entire royal family. And now, Catherine is revealing the emotional truth no parent ever wants to hear. Catherine breaks down after the doctor's words. The hospital lights were cold, the hallway silent. Princess Catherine, still recovering from her own battle with cancer, sat outside the trauma bay, waiting. It had been nearly 12 hours since Prince Louis was rushed in. Barely responsive, burning with a fever that didn't break. Machines had been surrounding his small frame all day. But now, it wasn't the machines or the fever that broke her. It was what the doctor finally said when he emerged. He didn't bring a diagnosis. He brought a realization. Physically, we're doing what we can, the doctor told her gently. But this didn't start yesterday. This began months ago. It's emotional. He's been holding something inside for a long time. At first, Catherine didn't move. She blinked once, nodded slightly. And then, the weight of that sentence hit her like a wall. Her son, her youngest, her sunshine, had been suffering, and she hadn't seen it. Or worse, she had seen it and dismissed it as something minor. Moodiness, fatigue, sibling rivalry, anything but this. He had been hurting, silently, through her treatments, her absence, her illness. And now his body was finally screaming what his heart had been too afraid to say. Catherine's breath caught. Her knees buckled as she dropped into the waiting chair, her hand over her mouth. For a moment, there was no royalty, no princess, no palace. Just a mother who'd missed the warning signs in her own child. She whispered, barely audible, "I didn't know. I didn't see it." Tears spilled freely, not for herself, but for what she had overlooked. For every meal Louis hadn't finished. For every morning he stayed in bed longer than usual. For every time he stood in the doorway of her room, watching, waiting, saying nothing. What shattered her wasn't the fever. It was the fact that this wasn't just a medical emergency. It was emotional collapse. The doctor confirmed what she had feared deep down. Louis's health crisis wasn't sudden. It had been building, quietly, invisibly. She turned to Prince William, eyes red, voice trembling. "He was breaking in front of us, and we didn't see it." It was the moment everything shifted, not just for Louis, but for them all. The boy who suddenly disappeared emotionally. Prince Louis used to be the loudest heartbeat of Adelaide Cottage, the one who filled mornings with dinosaur roars, chased ducks through the garden, and barged into his mother's office just to say hello. He made everyone laugh. Staff, security, even his more reserved big brother, Prince George. If there was chaos in the cottage, it was usually Louis, joyful, messy, loud. But sometime in late January 2024, that joy vanished. It started slowly. A missed breakfast, a skipped playdate. He stopped asking questions about the bugs in the garden. He no longer begged Princess Charlotte to build Lego castles or play dragon games. What once looked like ordinary childhood quiet turned into something much heavier. Louis withdrew, not physically but emotionally. His laughter stopped. His eyes lost their spark. He began spending long hours alone in his room. Some days, he'd stare out the window for what felt like hours. Teachers at Lambrook School quietly reached out. noting that Louis had stopped participating in class discussions. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was barely above a whisper. At first, William and Catherine assumed it was the weight of everything happening at home. Catherine's health crisis had turned their world upside down. The household was tense. Schedules had shifted. Nannies were covering more hours. Even George and Charlotte were handling it differently. William reassured himself and the staff. "He's just worried about his mum. It'll pass." But it didn't pass. Louis became emotionally unreachable. When his siblings asked him to play, he turned away. When Catherine tried to snuggle him before bed, he would stiffen. When William asked if he was okay, he'd say, "I'm fine," then return to his corner. And behind that quiet was something no one could name. Looking back now, the signs were all there. But in the chaos of royal life and the trauma of cancer, it was easy to miss, easy to excuse, easy to believe a child could bounce back from anything. But Louis didn't bounce back. He faded, day by day, until that hospital visit in April forced everyone to see what had been unfolding for months. His silence wasn't moodiness, it was heartbreak. The warning signs no one understood. In the months leading up to his collapse, Prince Louis was showing signs that, in hindsight, were impossible to ignore. And yet, somehow, everyone did. Breakfasts came back untouched. Pancakes once devoured in minutes sat cold on the plate. He stopped asking for second helpings of strawberries, his favorite. At first, it seemed like a simple change in appetite. Then came the silence. At Lambrook School, teachers quietly reached out to the palace. Louis wasn't engaging with other students. He often sat alone on the playground, sometimes mumbling to himself. His drawings shifted, from colorful family scenes to dark shapes with no figures. One teacher wrote in a report, "Louis seems emotionally distant. He's here, but not fully present." At home, it was the same story. The little boy who once charged down the halls, roaring like a lion, now walked slowly, head down, shoulders slumped. Staff noticed. So did his siblings. Princess Charlotte tried to get him to join her tea parties. He'd sit silently for a moment, then wander off. Prince George built an elaborate fort to lure Louis back into play. It stayed empty for days. Prince William, trying to balance royal duties and a sick wife, told the staff not to worry. "He's just overwhelmed," he said. "He'll bounce back." And Catherine, battling fatigue and medication side effects from her treatment, blamed herself. "He's scared because I've been gone," she whispered to a friend. "This is my fault." But no one realized the depth of it. No one imagined that behind Louis's silence was something far heavier than confusion or stress. He wasn't just sad. He was grieving, silently, a family he thought he was losing. By March 2024, it had become routine. Louis barely spoke, didn't eat much, rarely smiled. His sparkle, his chaos, his color, it all faded. But because there were no outbursts, no tantrums, no obvious cries for help, everyone assumed he was coping. Until it was too late. The warning signs weren't loud. They were subtle. And that's what made them so dangerous. The day everything turned into a medical emergency, it was a quiet Tuesday morning in early April 2024. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft glow over Adelaide Cottage. Princess Catherine, already awake, decided to check on Louis before breakfast. What she found changed everything. Louis was curled tightly under his blanket. His body was trembling, even though the room was warm. His face was flushed, damp with sweat. His eyes were half open, but unfocused. And when she whispered his name, he didn't respond. Her instincts kicked in. She called for William. Within seconds, he was in the room. One touch to Lewis's burning forehead was all it took. They knew this wasn't normal. This was serious. William gave clear, calm orders to the staff. Emergency protocols were activated immediately. The roads were cleared by 7:14 a.m. as royal security vehicles raced toward Frimley Park Hospital. Inside the car, Catherine held Lewis tightly, whispering over and over, "Stay with me, darling. Please stay with me." By the time they arrived, a trauma team was already waiting. Machines surrounded Lewis's small frame. Nurses moved fast, attaching IVs, monitoring heart rate, adjusting oxygen. The fever was climbing, past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius, and he was barely breathing on his own. Doctors asked questions William and Catherine couldn't answer. How long has he been like this? Was there any sign of illness? Any recent infections? But there were no answers, just fear. Catherine stood frozen outside the trauma bay, watching through the glass as strangers worked to save her son. For a woman who had just battled cancer, this moment felt cruel. She wasn't the patient anymore. Her child was. For the next several hours, the family waited in unbearable silence. No updates. No progress. Just the sound of beeping machines and the quiet hum of a hospital corridor. In that moment, the royal titles didn't matter. The duty, the public image, all of it faded away. All that remained was a mother and father who were losing their child right in front of them, and had no idea why. This wasn't just a fever. This was the moment everything they thought they understood about their son and about their parenting began to unravel. Hours of silence that shattered Catherine. The first hour passed with chaos. The next 11 passed in silence. Princess Catherine and Prince William sat in the pediatric ICU waiting room, side by side but saying little. It was now nearly 8 p.m., and they had been at Frimley Park Hospital since just after 7 a.m. Catherine hadn't eaten. She hadn't moved much. Her eyes stayed fixed on the double doors where nurses and doctors had rushed in and out, always too busy to stop, always too quiet to give hope. Every time the doors opened, she looked up, hoping, fearing, breaking all over again. Doctors had no answers. Tests had been run, scans performed, vital signs monitored, but there was still no diagnosis. Every time someone came close to speaking, it was followed by the same 4 words. "We don't know yet." At 7:45 p.m., a young nurse stepped out into the hallway. Catherine rose to her feet before the nurse even spoke, but the woman only shook her head softly. Still nothing. And that was the moment Catherine's strength finally cracked. Her knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Raw, loud, uncontrollable. "I can't do this again," she cried. "I can't lose another one." William knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. She buried her face into his chest, shaking. The sound of her cries echoed down the long hospital corridor. A sound few have ever heard from a royal. A sound not of weakness, but of unimaginable fear. It wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about the monarchy. This was a mother who felt helpless. This was a woman who had just walked through her own fight with cancer, only to face something even more terrifying. The thought of losing her child without knowing why. The nurses turned their backs to give her privacy. Security guards formed a respectful barrier down the hallway, but even they looked shaken. One staffer whispered later, "No one knew what to do. No one had ever seen her like that. Inside that corridor, time froze. For 12 hours, the palace had said nothing. But in that moment, Catherine's tears said more than any official statement ever could. The doctor's devastating realization. It was sometime after 9 p.m. when a senior pediatrician, not a junior nurse, not a technician, but the head of the team, finally sat down across from Prince William and Princess Catherine. The results were in. But the news wasn't a diagnosis. It was a revelation. "There's no infection," the doctor said gently. "Nothing physical we can confirm. No virus, no organ failure. His body is reacting to something that isn't coming from the outside." Catherine stared at him, confused. William asked, "What do you mean?" The doctor paused. "It's emotional. It's trauma. We're seeing a full system response to prolonged psychological stress. Your son's body is shutting down from fear." The silence in that room was heavier than anything that had come before. Prince Louis's medical crisis wasn't rooted in illness. It was rooted in heartbreak. The doctor explained that children at Louis's age are incredibly sensitive to change, especially when it involves a parent's health. Catherine's cancer diagnosis, even with careful explanations and gentle reassurance, had affected Louis more deeply than anyone had guessed. And because he had kept it all inside, his stress had turned physical. His body could no longer carry what his heart had been holding. "He thought he was losing you," the doctor said. "And it's possible he didn't feel safe enough to say it out loud." Catherine covered her mouth, frozen. Every missed moment, every sign they dismissed, every silent look, now burned in her memory. She had fought cancer with strength and grace, believing her family would be okay, but she hadn't seen the cost it was quietly taking on her son. William put his hand on hers. They didn't speak. There were no words left. The doctor added one final note. This didn't happen overnight. It built up, silently, for months. And now his body has finally said, "Enough." The truth was brutal. There was no infection to fight, no medication to cure this. What Louis needed now was time, reassurance, and emotional healing. And most of all, he needed to feel safe again. For Catherine, this changed everything. Her battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. But this time, it wasn't about survival. It was about recovery for her son's soul. Louis speaks and reveals the truth. On the third day, just after 11:30 a.m., the moment they had been praying for finally arrived. Prince Louis opened his eyes. His breathing had steadied overnight. Machines still surrounded him, but his heart rate was strong. Princess Catherine was at his bedside, gently brushing his hair back when she heard it. A whisper. "Papa, I'm sorry." The room froze. Prince William, sitting nearby, leaned forward. "You don't need to say sorry, Louis." But Louis looked away, his voice shaking. What he said next shattered them both. "I thought you were going to replace me." Through broken sentences and tearful fragments, Louis finally explained. He had overheard adult conversations during Catherine's treatment. He'd heard words like change, preparing, and future. Somewhere in his 6-year-old mind, he had come to believe that he was being left behind. He thought Catherine's illness meant she wouldn't come back, that she didn't have time for him, and worse, that a new baby was coming to take his place. He imagined being forgotten. He said he skipped meals so no one would waste food on me, that he hid in doorways to listen, that he didn't cry loudly because big kids don't bother people. It wasn't a medical condition. It was fear, real, deep, and suffocating. William turned toward the window, tears burning in his eyes. Catherine leaned close, kissing Louis's hand, whispering, "No baby is coming. You are not replaceable. You are our Louis. That will never change." Louis looked at her and asked, barely audible, "Promise?" "With every part of me," Catherine said. "You are everything." His voice was soft, his body still weak. But in that moment, Louis was no longer silent. Parental guilt hits with full force. That night, long after Prince Louis had fallen asleep, William and Catherine sat alone in the dimly lit lounge outside the pediatric ICU. The halls had quieted. The machines had settled. But inside their hearts, there was only noise, memories, regrets, and a silence neither of them could escape. They didn't speak at first, just sat side by side, hands loosely touching, eyes fixed on nothing. The weight in the room wasn't just from exhaustion. It was realization. Catherine broke the silence first. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He was telling us for months. We just didn't hear him." Her mind raced through every moment she had brushed off. The untouched meals, the empty stairs, the small footsteps lingering just outside her door. "I thought he was coping," she whispered. "I told myself he was adjusting." William exhaled slowly, his eyes wet. "I thought he was sad, not breaking." The guilt between them was no longer unspoken. It was alive, in the air. They had been so focused on surviving Catherine's cancer, holding their family together, maintaining public duties, and protecting the image of strength, that they missed the quiet unraveling of their youngest son. They weren't absent parents, but they had been distracted ones. And now, they couldn't stop asking themselves, how didn't we see it? Catherine remembered a night in mid-February. Louis had been crying alone in the library. She had walked in, hugged him, and assumed it was a bad dream. Now she wondered, had it been something more? William's memory turned to March 18th. Louis had refused to join him and George for football in the garden, something he never passed up. "I told myself it was a phase," he muttered. It wasn't. By 10:40 p.m., the decision was made. Every royal duty was put on hold. Catherine canceled all engagements through July 2024. William did the same. The press team was instructed to handle all public messaging. Family came first. No exceptions. Therapy sessions were booked immediately, not just for Louis, but for George, Charlotte, and for them too. Healing wasn't a matter of good PR. It was a matter of survival, emotional, relational, and personal. They knew the path forward wouldn't be perfect, but they also knew they would never again ignore silence in their children. As they walked slowly back to Louis's hospital room, William looked at Catherine and said softly, "We're going to do this differently now." This time, Catherine didn't cry. She nodded, not with fear, but with certainty. She was no longer just recovering from illness. She was rebuilding her family. The family steps in to rebuild him. As the truth about Prince Louis's emotional collapse became clear, the royal family closed ranks, not around their public image, but around their son. King Charles III, already weakened by his own health battles, arrived at the hospital without fanfare. No red carpets, no security fanfare, just a grandfather stepping in. He brought a worn Beatrix Potter book that had once comforted William as a child. "For Louis," he said softly, "in case he needs a friend." Charles returned every morning for a week. He didn't ask questions, he just sat. Once, when Louis stirred in his bed, he whispered, "You're not alone, little one." We've all felt that. At home, George and Charlotte also began reconnecting with their little brother. On the second day, Charlotte sat beside Louis's bed and read him her favorite story. On the third, George brought a soft football and gently rolled it toward him. Louis didn't kick it far, but he smiled. Therapists arrived quietly, beginning gentle sessions through storytelling and play. A psychologist told the couple, he wasn't acting out. He was grieving, a version of you he thought he'd lost. Schedules were rewritten. Mornings were reserved for family. Evenings for one-on-one time. Nannies stepped back. Parents stepped in. The palace wasn't leading this recovery. Love was. Catherine's final vow as a mother. As Prince Louis grew stronger, so did Princess Catherine's resolve. She made a quiet but unshakable decision. Her children would never be left in emotional silence again. Her team was instructed to cancel every engagement until August 1st, 2024. "My child comes first now," she said. "Not protocol, not press, him." Morning check-ins became sacred. Therapy sessions continued. Catherine took an online course on child trauma and grief processing, filling notebooks with handwritten notes. They introduced emotion cards for daily sharing. Every night ended with a question. "What was your best feeling today?" Louis's answer one evening, "Mommy kissed me 3 times." That one sentence changed everything. Catherine no longer saw her title as a shield. She saw it as a responsibility, not to the public, but to her children. She had once fought cancer with bravery. Now she was fighting something harder: guilt, regret, and the long road of emotional repair. She didn't announce it to the press. She didn't hold a press conference. She simply changed. Quietly. Completely. William followed her lead. Together, they rewrote their family's rhythm, not with royal protocols, but with presence, intention, and love. And slowly, Louis began laughing again. He wasn't the same boy. He was something stronger, not because of what he endured, but because of how deeply he was finally seen. This wasn't just a medical crisis. It was a cry for help that no one heard, until it nearly broke a family. Princess Catherine's tears weren't for headlines. They were for the moments she missed, the pain her son hid, and the truth she couldn't unsee. Now, everything is changing. Royal duties have been paused. Priorities have been rewritten. And through it all, one promise stands. Prince Louis will never feel unseen again. Because this time, Catherine isn't just a princess. She's a mother, and she's listening with everything she has.